the Chamberlain's men were more lenient than I expected or deserved. Both Mr. Pope and Mr. Armine argued on my behalf. Even Mr. Shakespeare, who had most cause to call for my dismissal, seemed inclined to forgive me. Only Jack spoke out against me, and not very vehemently. So it was that I was permitted to stay on as apprentice with the company, and I was grateful for it. I recognize now that I was being offered something more than just a career as a player acting out a variety of roles. I was also being offered a chance at a real-life role as a valued member of the Globe family. My only cause for regret was that Julia had not been so fortunate as I. What had become of her no one seemed to know. Neither had we heard any news of Nick, but in his case, no one cared much. When several weeks went by with no word from Julia, Sandra and I persuaded Mr. Armine to accompany us into the grimy depths of Alsatia, where we made a few inquiries. The man named Hugh recalled hearing that she was working as a serving maid for a household in Petite France, that colony of French émigrés just outside the walls of the city. Sandra and I tried to track her down there, but neither of us knew enough French to make much headway. All through the summer and into the fall, my schedule at the Globe remained hectic. In addition to all my new roles, I was given the task of copying out the individual sides from the book of each new play. Still, I doubt that a day went by in which I did not think of Julia and wonder how she fared. I began to fear that she had joined her father at his unsavory trade and disappeared into the city's underworld, in which case we might despair of ever seeing her again. Then, a week before Christmas, as we were preparing Twelfth Night for presentation at the court, Julia entered our lives again briefly, like the well-known messenger I had so often played, who delivers his message and then departs. Mr. Pope and Sandra and I were on our way home after a trying performance, at which three so-called gentlemen took seats upon the very stage, thrust their feet in the players' paths, and distracted us with their witty comments. So busy were we venting our irritation that we scarcely noticed the serving maid who approached us until she spoke our names. Widge? Sander? We halted and stared at her. Julia? I said. She laughed at our looks of surprise. Yes, it's me, disguised as a serving maid. Good day, Mr. Pope, she added, not very cordially. Mr. Pope bowed slightly, as if to a lady, which I had to remind myself Julia now was. We've all been wondering what became of you. Nothing of any consequence, I'm afraid. That is unfortunate, Mr. Pope said, and I could tell that his words were sincere. I truly wish that things could have worked out differently. So do I. Her tone was still far from friendly. Mr. Pope cleared his throat uncomfortably. Well, you'll want to talk with your friends, I expect. I'll bid you good morrow. She made a curtsy that was neither very graceful nor very gracious. When Mr. Pope was out of hearing, Sander said, You might have been more kind. It wasn't his fault you had to go. I know that. It's no one's fault, really, or everyone's. It's just that I haven't quite gotten over it. She tossed her hair, which had grown long, and went on more cheerfully. But I didn't come to open up old wounds. I came to tell you some good news, actually. It seems I may have the chance to be a player after all. Truly, I said eagerly, they've changed the rule. No, I'm afraid not. But you see, Mr. Hemmings once told me that in France, women are permitted to act on the stage. So I've been working in the household of a French wine merchant, saving up my wages for passage money and learning the language. And, well, the long and short of it is, I sail for France in the morning. That's the good news? I asked. Yes, aren't you happy for me? Oh, aye, of course. That's as happy as which gets, I think, Sander said, and shook his head. Gog's bread, Julia. It's hard enough learning lines in English. How are you going to do it in French? She gave him an indignant look. Je parle français très bien, monsieur. He laughed and held up his hands in surrender. Very well, mademoiselle. If anyone can do it, it's you. Best of luck. I mean, bonne chance. Merci. She curtsied again, less awkwardly. Which? Aren't you going to wish me luck? Aye, I said glumly. Good luck. She reached out and took my hand. You needn't look so forlorn. Come now, smile a little. For me? This business of friendship was a curious thing, I thought. Almost as difficult to learn as the business of acting. Sometimes you were expected to tell the truth, to express your thoughts and your feelings. And then other times, what was wanted was a lie, a bit of disguise. I was still but apprentice in the art, but slowly and painfully I was learning. Though in truth I felt more like crying, I put on the smile she asked for, or as near to it as I could come. Up Yorkshire, we say, fair chieve you. She squeezed my hand. Fair chieve you, then. She backed away as though compelled to leave, yet reluctant to let us from her sight. At last she turned and hurried off in the direction of the Thames, which tomorrow would carry her to sea. As I watched her go, tears welled in my eyes, and for the first time since I was a child, I let them come. Now I understood why she had left us before without any farewell. Parting was not, as I had heard one of Mr. Shakespeare's characters say, a sweet sorrow. It was bitter as gall. Behind us, Mr. Pope cleared his throat again. She's a plucky girl. Embarrassed, I wiped at my eyes. She is that. He put a hand on Sanders' shoulder and mine. We'd best be heading home now, boys. Goody Willingson has promised us toad in the hole for tonight's repast. Toad in the hole? I said, laughing a little despite myself. Don't laugh, Sanders said. It's good, almost as good as Bubble and Squeak. It certainly doesn't sound very good, but I can rely on your judgment, I suppose. You can that. As the three of us, Mr. Pope and his boys, walked home, I reflected on these new terms and all the others I had learned and unlearned since my arrival here but a few months before. Though I hadn't quite learned a new language, as Julia was doing, I felt almost as though I had. For every ken and whiz and I had dropped from my vocabulary, I had picked up a dozen new and useful terms. Some were fencing terms, some were peculiar to London, some were the jargon of the player's trade, but the ones that had made the most difference to me were the words I had heard before and never fully understood their import. Words such as honesty and trust, loyalty